Well, to help us unpack all of these political developments is political analyst Thobani Zikalala. He joins us now via video link to weigh in on this development, particularly the announcement there by the MK party to remove Floyd Shivambu and redeploy him to Parliament. Thobani, very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. So this was a highly anticipated press briefing. And of course, you've been listening in with me. Just give us a sense then in terms of how should we be reading into this latest development. Of course, the party saying Shivambu's removal is in direct contravention with its constitution.
Good afternoon, Unati, and good afternoon to your viewers. I mean, in reading the redeployment of Nico Floyd Shivambu, we must read it in two different ways. One, there has been, since I think he was appointed as SG, and of course started acting in that position, and since he has joined, there has been some sentiment in the party where some people inside the party were not happy with his appointment, were not happy with this idea that people were coming from organizations like the EFF and simply being appointed to senior positions. And I think that sentiment has been developing inside the party. And of course, when he then decided to visit his friend or prophet, if you can put it that way, Shepherd Bushiri, who is, of course, a wanted criminal in South Africa. When he decided to visit him in Malawi and in his church, and of course, he says he was visiting in personal capacity. And of course, then there is the issue of the perceived association of Shepherd Bushiri, not just him as a criminal, but also his perceived association or support of.
Oh, unfortunately, Thobani is frozen there, unfortunately, and really wanted to hear some of those sentiments that he had. Of course, this announcement coming just a few moments ago, and in fact, some of those questions that were posed to the party were the effect that any of those decisions that have been taken by the party to do with some of the divisions that we've been seeing in recent weeks. In fact, Thobani, I believe you are back. You were just responding to that question in terms of how we should then be viewing this particular removal or redeployment of Floyd Shivambu.
As I was saying, I think I was trying to give you the history in twofold. One, that issue of that visit to Malawi and its perceived political implications. But on the other side, the long developing sentiments against Floyd Shivambu in the party. I think for me, he committed a very big own goal when he went to Malawi, because it allowed those who have always wanted him out of that position of SG to gain ground on him. And I think because of how the MK party is done, I mean, is run, I mean, you need, if you are close and you can get the ear of the president, it seems you can get your decisions, I mean, to become official decisions of the party. And that's one of the problems, and I think the MK party must look at, that this perception that they've created, that if you can get the ear of the president, whatever you may say may become the law in the party. It almost perceives itself or gives an impression that it is run as some patronage network where if you have got proximity to the leadership of the party, you can get your things passed. I mean, if you look at the many decisions that have been taken, and of course the idea that if that privilege Shunkanta happens, then decisions can be passed and be made into law. And I think that for me, some of the things that the party will have to deal with, this idea that the decision of something that happened almost 3 months ago. Of course, parties must be patient. The MK party, we must be very empathetic to it, that it is a party that is still building itself. And with 18 months in, some of the traditions, the cultures of the party have not been ingrained. And also coupled with the fact that many of the people who are inside the party have got two problems. Some of them are matured politicians or experienced politicians who come from particular political parties who have learned political cultures and traditions, and they want to infuse those into the running of the party, some of them being factionalism and the idea of patronage. On the other hand is an NK party that's trying to build itself and to inculcate its own traditions. And in doing that, there will be some clashes, and it will create some image of some political mess or political chaos. And of course, knowing, I mean, the nature of the president of the party. I mean, we've seen him when he was president of other parties and was president of the state, and how he took decisions of this nature. I mean, we knew that one thing what maybe Jacob Zuma may not be afraid of is removing people, and also those who come into the party because, of course, of some perceived proximity to him, or believing that they are owed some loyalty by President Zuma, will always try to exploit that. And some of them, because of that proximity to him, will want to find themselves in a position where they have some position of influence inside the party. That are some of the things I think the MK party must be wary of, in particular because of how it has postured itself as a revolutionary movement that seeks to fundamentally change society. They must be seen to be getting rid of some of these traditions, some of these cultures that have been learned, and some of them that are wrong. I mean, cultures of factionalism, of patronage, of the abuse of proximity to leadership, of backstepping, of ill-talking of about other comrades, and all those things. Those are some of the things that politicians in the country, the ills the politicians of this country have got on their back. And if the MK party wants to continue to be seen as a party that is going to come and bring revolutionary change or fundamental change to society, they must really think about how they can get rid of this, or at least give a perception that they are dealing with some of these ingrained political cultures of South Africa.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that point, that last point that you're making, because it does really speak to the kind of leadership that we are seeing in the party, doesn't it? This is a party that's less than 2 years old, and already we know that there are some sort of camps. We understand, of course, that on the one camp, it does favor Duduzile Zuma Sambudla, of course, the daughter of the former president of the country, who happens to be the president of the MK party. Floyd Shivambu, too, in his role, has been there less than 7 months, I think. I mean, what does that then speak to in terms of just the kind of leadership that is needed in the MK party, particularly when you look at the local government elections that is really just happening next year?
Okay. You see, if you look at the MK party, you may look at it in different strands. One, there are those who claim that those who came first, who came after the announcement of the 16th of December 2023. There are those who claim that they've always been with Jacob Zuma, even when the MK party didn't exist. Therefore, they deserve some sort of sympathy, and they deserve some sort of prestige inside the party. Then there are those, of course, who came from other political parties, who were already leaders in other political parties, who came as part of that machinery that was being built to try and stabilize the party. And I think if we are to give some sort of appraisal of Floyd Shivambu as an SG of the party, we can, say that he has brought some credibility, some stability, some political articulation, at least at the level of leadership, where there was some bit of a political stability being articulated, a very coherent and clear message being communicated by the party. You've seen, of course, how the party has been built, and you've seen it winning, I think, by-elections and things like that. It was developing into a party that at least can contend, because the idea that they can continue to rely on the image and the personality of Jacob Zuma beyond what he has delivered for them. That image has delivered the 15% that they got in the last elections. To go further than that, they will have to build a stable organization that can be perceived by people that it is the right organization for them. So this idea that people will continue to vote for the MK party purely on the basis that Jacob Zuma is the president, for me, is not unsustainable. You still need to build a organization. And I don't think some of the people who have been creating some of the instability are very much interested in that idea of building a new organization that can be able to withstand and live beyond the brand Jacob Zuma, because that personality, as much as it's colossal in South African politics, is very big. But it may not be sustainable for you to continue to rely on that idea, because it may not get you beyond the 2 million votes that maybe you may get. I think for me, those are some of the problems that they must. But the idea of the dismantling of the cultures of division, the cultures of factionalism, of patronage, of the abuse of proximity to leadership, this idea of the ranking of membership around who came when and who did what when. I think that is problematic. It does not show a majority amongst the membership of the MK party that wants to continue to build a party that is free from the traditions and the history that they've been part of. Because this idea that someone led somewhere, therefore they must lead here, that the idea that we were together with this comrade here, therefore he must lead, itself is problematic. I think that the party must be treated as a new part. Of course, some of the individual members bring particular experiences, and these experiences must be put at the service of the party, and without this idea that we've seen in political parties where egos and the idea of the love of positions have played a role in how some of the parties have become so dysfunctional, especially parties that have been found post-1994.
And Thobani, I'm going to want us to speak about, just some of the traits and the strengths that you think then, Shivambu possesses. But before I do that, in fact, we are going to be speaking to our politics editor, Mzwandile Mbeja. You will recall, of course, he spoke to Shivambu last week on his trip to Malawi. I want you to listen to that trip, to that clip, and we'll have a conversation then, particularly also around the kind of environment that the MK party is creating now, particularly as it does seem that there are inconsistencies when it does apply some of its constitution. But let's listen to that clip.
I went to the church because who am I to refuse to go to the church? I had to go to the church, and I didn't speak anything at the church. I just attended to listen to the sermon.
But the optics, Mr. Shivambu, you are a leader of the official opposition in South Africa.
Yes.
And this individual is a fugitive from law in South Africa. So those optics, and on top of it, your party issues a statement dissociating itself.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate statement was out of the misunderstanding as well of what got to transpire in terms of the visit itself. And I'm not a law enforcement agency, one, but two, factually, there is no court ruling in Malawi which South Africa has been pursuing to declare or characterize Bushiri as a fugitive. If there was such, the Malawian government was going to hand him over. But I'm saying to you now that if anything, the Malawian state is protecting him like in terms of his own security, in terms of what gets to happen. And if the South African government wants to pursue him, they know what processes they must follow, they must deal with, and everything else there. By the way, I can go to any church, even of convicted criminals. Like whichever church I want to go to, I can go to any religious institution as long as I believe that is a correct thing to do and everything else there. Like I'm not the only person who does that. I say to you now, that there were more than 5,000 South Africans who were registered to participate.
But they're not the Secretary General of MK.
Yeah, they're not Secretary General of the MK, but I have the permissibility to go to any religious institutions. I, by the way, don't know what criminal offenses the other people whose churches have visited have committed in the past or have got to participate in. But I went to Malawi for a political program which was mandated and was very impactful in terms of the Pan-Africanist program and agenda which Mkhonto Sizwe is in pursuit of uniting Pan-Africanist and progressive forces all over the world and in the continent in particular. And Malawi is of particular interest because in the struggle against apartheid, Malawi associated with the apartheid government under Hastings Banda, the president there. They openly supported apartheid. They had full economic cooperation with apartheid. And we can't have a Malawi that is not part of Pan-Africanism, of a Pan-African developmental project. So the politics of Malawi must be contested and guided from that point of view. So
Thobani, as we wrap our conversation and just having listened to that interview then with Floyd Shivambu, of course conducted by politics editor Mzwandile Mbeja, just give us a sense then, particularly around the optics that Mzwandile was talking about in response to what was said.
I think Floyd Shivambu, I mean, being known as a very astute intellectual, especially on the Marxist tradition, I think he miscalculated the optics, the political optics of his visits to Shepherd Bushiri, especially for ordinary South Africans and just the political landscape of South Africa. Shepherd Bushiri is a wanted criminal in South Africa. He escaped and escaped bail in South Africa through very unclear ways, and has been tried. Where South Africa has won the extradition case, of course it's being appealed and all those things. He's a wanted criminal. That's the first thing. Leave the other different optics of he's a religious leader like many others and what you call. Yes, that is maybe true for many people in this country, but one part of it is that he's a wanted criminal. The second thing is that if you look at the stage where, as I was speaking of the insignia in the space, in the stage, you will find that there was a flag of Israel there. Leave the idea that Malawi is a South African country. Leave the idea that they are maybe part of the Pan-African struggle. They may have supported us during apartheid and all those things. Speak about Shepherd Bushiri as a person and in relation to the Pan-African struggle that you speak about. It doesn't seem for me that that's a good optic you want to be associated with. And look at the fact that he seems to have no problem displaying insignia of a state that your party completely stands opposed in their occupation of Palestine. I think Floyd miscalculated that. And I think in this interview, I don't know whether the question was posed to him and he was prepared to answer it, because it seemed that he provided an answer that is not in agreement with what his own political party that he was SG of thought about the trip. And I think he miscalculated so much, because it is this trip that gave credence to many people who inside his party who have always not wanted him, even if before the trip they didn't agree with him. But they continued, to on-job because the leader of the party, Zuma, President Zuma, had not removed him and no like. But then the trigger was that trip to say, look, why we have always been saying that this person must go. I think those optics were not properly calculated. And I think even in his response, he doesn't seem to still understand why there is a problem, right? And I think for me, it's a disappointment, because we know Floyd Shivambu is a very deeply intellectual person, or at least he has been perceived that way. And how he handled this issue, I don't think it is something that he can be proud of, that he calculated properly. But of course, Floyd Shivambu being short, Floyd Shivambu, I don't think the political discourse in this country, we will lose his voice, we will lose his participation. And I think also, even though he has been doing a very good job in trying to stabilize the MK party and transform it to a real organization, but I think also in parliament, he can help them very much in terms of strengthening that parliamentary caucus, because also there's been questions about the performance of that parliamentary caucus in parliament of the MK party. And I think adding someone like Floyd Shivambu adds a voice that can be able to strengthen and, of course, add with his intellectual prowess, because it seems also that parliamentary caucus also needs to be reorganized in such a way that the best talents there can be seen and they can be able to do their work properly.
Valid points, Thobani. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Of course, Thobani Zikalala is a political analyst, just weighing in, of course, on that breaking news story that you see there on your screen just a few moments ago. Floyd Shivambu being removed as the MK Secretary General.